Did you know there are over 30 million born-again evangelical Christians in the United States who do not vote even for office of the president? We are Million Voices, and our heart is to change that. Joining us today from the great state of California is best-selling author and radio talk show host and executive producer of an acclaimed film, Uncle Tom, Larry Elder. Larry, welcome to Million Voices today. It is an honor to have you.
Kevin, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to our time together, Larry.
Well, let's see if you feel that way when we're done.
I think I will. So we're just going to jump right in.
I was just talking to Kevin. You know, Kevin's name, of course, is Kevin Koontz, K-O-O-N-T-Z. And I said, Kevin, please tell me your middle name does not begin with a K.
It does not. Thank God.
It's William. I said, well, your parents dodged a bullet.
They did. They had mercy on me.
Oh, man.
I hope you'll have that much mercy on me today. So, well, let's just dive right in, Larry. You know, I've listened to lots of different, watched Uncle Tom. I've watched different interviews with you, and you talk very fondly about your father. How has your father contributed to your success, Larry Elder?
Well, Kevin, it's kind of strange because I wrote a book about my relationship with my father called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. And it's about an 8-hour conversation the two of us had. I didn't like my father growing up. I thought he was mean. I thought he was angry. I thought he was irritable for no particular reason. I often, Kevin, wondered why the man even had kids. If you're going to be that mean and that ornery, what's the point?
Wow.
And I told myself every day I'm going to get strong enough to beat his butt someday. Well, unfortunately, my dad starts a little cafe when I'm 10 years old. He was a janitor. He cleaned toilets. He had 2 full-time jobs cleaning toilets. Saved his nickels and dimes, starts a little cafe. So now, of course, I have to work for him. And he's no more fun to work for than he is when he's at home. Yells at me all the time, in my opinion, often for the wrong reason. I was, in my opinion, the best waiter he ever had. He was so hard on me. And one day I told myself, if this guy yells at me one more time, I'm going to walk out. I love to say, Kevin, I said to myself, if he does it one more time, I'm going to come up to him and I'm going to confront him and I'm going to say, now see here, we're going to have a different relationship. But I was afraid of my father. I could never do that. So I walked out of the restaurant. I was 15 years old. My dad came home. He was furious. He said, why did you leave? And this was the first time I ever spoke back to my dad. And I said, Dad, I got sick and tired of the way you spoke to me. My dad balled up the $10 he paid me a day. He threw it at me as I lay on the bed. He walked out of my bedroom. And Kevin, my dad and I did not have a meaningful conversation for another 10 years. When I say meaningful conversation, I mean not even, what about those Rams? Do you think it's going to rain? I ignored him. It was easy because he worked late. I was in high school. We were able to dodge each other. And so I graduated from high school. I go to college. I go to law school. I pass the Ohio bar. I get this big job with a big law firm. I'm 25 years old, making the equivalent of about $150,000. I should be living large, but I can't sleep, Kevin. And I know it has to do with my dad. Thinking about him all the time. I never thought we'd be friends, but I called my secretary. I was in Ohio in those days. I said, cancel all my appointments. I want to go to California. I'll be back in a couple of days. I didn't tell my mom and my dad that I was coming. And by the way, my mom and my dad always stayed together. They were married 56 years. He wasn't a drunk. He wasn't abusive. Nothing like that. I just thought he was mean. So I walked to the restaurant, and my dad was shocked to see me. I said, Dad, I want to talk to you. I figured it would be about a 5 or 10 minute conversation. He said, fine. So I put your bags in the back, Larry. I said, no, Dad. It's only going to be here for 5 or 10 minutes. My dad said, okay, wait for an hour when we close. So I sat there for an hour and a half, watching my dad interact. And I said to myself, now don't tee off on the guy. Just give him the cliff notes about why you're mad at him. He'll probably call you an ungrateful son. It'll last 5 or 10 minutes. You'll be out the door. My dad sat down, and I teed off on him, Kevin. Based on our short relationship, you know how I can go. So I told him every whipping, every spanking, everything he ever said to me, everything he ever did to me. I told him and I told him and I told him. I talked nonstop for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I was out of ammo. I had nothing else to say. My dad looks up. He was stirring a cup of coffee sitting next to me, 2 seats right next to each other. And he said, is that it?
Is that it?
You didn't speak to me for 10 years because of that? And I said, yes. And he said, let me tell you about my father. And Kevin, honestly, this is the first I ever heard of this. I knew my dad was an only child because we never got any presents. from his family. I met his mom one time, and I knew that he had a tough background, but I didn't really care. I didn't like him. So he said, "Your last name, Elder?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That's not my biological father's name." I said, "What?" He said, "What is your biological father's name?" He said, "I don't know. I never met him." Who was Elder? Elder was a man who was in my mother's life the longest. My mother was illiterate, irresponsible, didn't work, drank, had a series of boyfriends, each one more irresponsible than the next one. One day he told me, I came home from school, I was 13 years old. I start quarreling with my mom's then boyfriend. She sides with the boyfriend, kicks me out of the house, never to return. 13-year-old black boy, Athens, Georgia, Jim Crow South at the beginning of the Great Depression. Good Lord. And my dad then spent the next 7.5 hours telling me about his life. And he left home, he got a job doing anything, became a Pullman porter on the trains. They were the largest private employer of blacks in those days. And my dad came out to California on a run, and he couldn't believe how sunny it was. You could walk into a restaurant and get served. So my dad made a mental note, maybe someday I'll relocate to California. Pearl Harbor, my dad joined the Marines. I said, "Dad, why the Marines?" 2 reasons, and you know what they are. They go where the action is, and I love those uniforms. My dad was stationed on the island of Guam. He was in charge of cooking. My dad can look at a cake, Kevin, and tell you what's in it. That's how good the man is. He goes back to Chattanooga when the war is over to get him a job as a short order cook, and he's told by restaurant after restaurant after restaurant, "We don't hire N-words," to his face. He goes to an unemployment office. The lady says, "You went through the wrong door," sends him back to the door that says colored only, to the very same lady who sent him out. She just wanted him to know what the rules were. My dad came home, said, "This is BS. I'm going to LA, get me a job." He goes out here to LA, walks around, and he's treated the same way, although they say it somewhat differently. They told him, "I'm sorry, we can't hire anybody without references." My dad said, "References to be a short order cook? I cooked in the military." They treated him the same way. He went to an unemployment office, this time just one door, and he took the first job, which was cleaning toilets, took a second full-time job cleaning toilets, cooked for a family on the weekend, and because he left home when he was in the 8th grade, he went to night school a couple of nights a week to get his GED. The reason the man was so cranky, Kevin, is he never slept. 15 minutes here, half hour here, hour here. You do that not day after day, not week after week, not month after month, but year after year after year, and you come home to a house with 3 rambunctious boys, what kind of mood are you going to be in? So this conversation took 8 hours, Kevin, and my dad got bigger and bigger and bigger, and Larry got smaller and smaller and smaller. Now I'm crying. And I said, "Dad, please forgive me for having these views of you." And my dad said, "There's nothing to forgive. You didn't know you were a kid. But follow the advice I've always given you and your brothers. Hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. You cannot control the outcome, Larry, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before you moan about what somebody did to you or said to you, go to the nearest mirror and say to yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, Larry, no matter how good you are, how hard you work, bad stuff will happen. How you deal with that bad stuff will tell your mother and me if we raised a man." From that point on, we became the best of friends. For the next 35 years, we had a wonderful relationship, arguably even closer than my mom and I are. My mom and I were very, very close. My dad lived to be 95 years old.
Larry, how would your life be different if you weren't raised by your father?
Well, the whole point about having a mother and a father in the house is that you have better outcomes in life. Anybody born in America hit the lottery. You hit the lottery again if you have a mother and a father in the same house, especially if they loved each other, and you can see that. So I was lucky. I had 2 parents who worked together, and Barack Obama once said, "A kid raised without a father is 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail." It is the #1 problem facing America and the #1 problem facing Black America. And it's not racism, it's not systemic racism, it's not inequality. The #1 problem facing Black America is the fact that over 70% of Black kids are raised, brought into the world without a father in the house.
Wow, Larry, this is so fantastic. I'm really enjoying this. So how much of a problem do you see in our country today where there's almost this unconscious bias and even white privilege?
You know, I just wrote a piece about these athletes like LeBron James and Doc Rivers, the coach of the LA Clippers, who came out after Jacob Blake was shot and said, "Oh my goodness, why do these kinds of things keep on happening? Why does this keep happening to us? Why do we keep loving America," Doc said, "when America does not love us back?" Good Lord. These people, LeBron James, I forget how many social media followers he has. I want to say 20 or 30 million. Extremely, extremely influential. Now, when LeBron James approaches his own profession, it's stats, it's data, it's shooting percentages, field goal percentages. When his agent negotiates a better contract, he comes in armed with facts and data to make the case. Where is that same mindset when it comes to this narrative that the police are killing blacks just because they're black? The facts do not support that. There are 50 million interactions between the police and civilians every single year. Out of those 50 million interactions, about 11 million arrests occur. Out of those 11 million arrests, there are 60,000 officers who are assaulted. When all of this happens, there are 1,000 people killed by the police every year for the last 5 years on average. 500 of them have been white. 250 of them have been black. The police have killed at least as many unarmed whites as they have unarmed blacks. Nobody seems to care about that. And a black Harvard professor named Roland Fryer, he is so brilliant, he is Harvard's youngest tenured professor in Harvard's history, and Harvard is the oldest college in America. That's how bright this guy is. He just knew that the police were killing blacks just because they were black, and he was surprised nobody had done a study on this. So he thought he would do a study to confirm it. And he said, the results were the most surprising of my career. Not only did I not find the police were killing blacks just because they're black, the police are more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect, probably because they're afraid of being called racist and being sued. So it is not true. And it's one thing to believe stuff that's not true, that's just stupid and not true. This is getting people killed. How? There's something called the Ferguson effect. When cops are routinely accused of racism, they pull back. The bad guys know, and the people who are hurt are the very people that Black Lives Matter and their other sympathizers claim that they care about. The other thing that happens is you're a young black teenager. You've been told by Sharpton, by Jesse Jackson, by Farrakhan, by CNN, by MSNBC Hee-Haw that the police are out to get you. Why wouldn't you have your dukes up? Why wouldn't you follow commands like lambs if you think somebody's going to hurt you? So you're causing all sorts of conflict that does not need to occur. The fact is that half of the homicides in this country are black victims, and almost all of them are killed by other black people. Out of the 1,000 people that were killed by the police, less than 4% were white cops killing an unarmed black person. And unarmed does not necessarily mean not dangerous. Michael Brown was unarmed, but his DNA was found on the officer's gun. So when you look at the percentage of white cops killing unarmed blacks who are not reasonably perceived as a threat, you're talking about even less than 4%. But last week in Chicago, over 50 people shot. Week before that, 66 people shot, 5 killed. Week before that, 55 people shot, 10 killed in one city.
Wow. That's a great question, Larry. So with the narrative that you see, in news today, even conversations that you have with other people, that it almost feels like that there's this accusation or really more of a suggestion that people are really telling you how you have to think, and you have to think a certain way because you have more melanin than me. What are your thoughts around that?
Kevin, what the end game of all this is really, to me, really something very simple and very sinister. You look at these protesters, they're in the streets. Rochester, the PD just resigned. She was a black female. The police officer who runs the police department in Minneapolis is a black and Hispanic. I'm in Los Angeles. In 1992 to 2002, that period of 10 years, there were back-to-back black police chiefs, including during the O.J. Simpson case, when the allegations were made that the police had fabricated evidence to convict an innocent man. He did a full department study during the trial to make people realize this was not happening. He put out the study. Nobody cared. The people that felt O.J. Simpson was being framed by the racist LAPD continue believing O.J. Simpson was framed by the racist LAPD. It didn't matter. In LA and in New York, our two largest police departments. The departments now reflect the racial demographics of their city. LA is 40% Hispanic, so is the LAPD. 30% white, so is the LAPD. Around 9% black, so is the LAPD. The rest Asian American, so is the LAPD. It still doesn't matter. So when you look at all of this, you look at all the black mayors, the black police chiefs, these left-wing city councils who've been charged in all these cities, and people are still complaining. What they're really complaining about, Kevin, is they want reparations. They want white people to give black people, quote, their stuff. In fact, there was a chant led by a number of people in Rochester the other day saying just that. Give us your blank or we're going to blank stuff down. That's what they said. That's what the end game is, reparations.
Wow, it's incredible. So So you have been known to be a different, more of a forward thinker, Larry. So is everything that
Among
you,
other things.
what's that?
I said, among other things, I
Among
could
other,
call.
so everything that you just talked about, does that qualify you as an Uncle Tom?
Well, and that's why I did the film, Kevin, because myself, Candace Owens, the late Herman Cain, who's in the film, Alan West, who's in the film, Pastor Stephen Broden, who's in the film, Carol Swain, who's a law professor at Vanderbilt. All of us have been called these kinds of names. Nobody, by the way, is offended in the sense of having his or her feelings hurt. We're bothered because the conversation is not taking place. How much further along would the Black community have been if Thomas Sowell, who's also mentioned in the film, had been listened to 40 years ago when he talked about choice in public education? Studies are showing that the dropout rates are improving substantially with choice in school. Reading and math scores are improving, and parental satisfaction through the roof when you have school choice. So how much further along would Black people have been if people like that had been listened to? So that's what's disappointing. The conversation is not taking place.
Yeah, that's amazing. So can you explain to people exactly what an Uncle Tom is?
And Uncle Tom is somebody who is a sellout, who has turned his back on his own people. And it comes from the book by Harriet Beecher Stowe called Uncle Tom's Cabin, which came out before the Civil War and which Abraham Lincoln allegedly points to as a cause of the Civil War, because people in the North, in a very graphic way, were described the horrors of slavery, and they hadn't really thought about it apparently for that time. So it helped to ignite the debate over slavery. Now the irony is that Uncle Tom in the book was actually a hero, and he was based on a real life man named Josiah Henson. The reason we know that is because when Harriet Beecher Stowe was accused of making all this stuff up, she produced all the people after whom she patterned all these characters. And Josiah Henson was a slave who left and founded a colony for freed slaves in Canada. He was a hero. He was also a hero in the book because he refused to turn over slaves who had run away, and therefore he was killed. So for some reason, the term now becomes a term that demeans anybody who believes that Black people, anybody who does not think Black people are victimized or victims of racism, who don't think Black people are oppressed, who are, quote, trying to curry favor with the white man, they're dismissed and derided as Uncle Toms, when in fact Uncle Tom was really a hero in the book. It just shows you that most people have never read the book. But that really kind of is not the point, Kevin. The point is it's become a term that's used to shut down conversation. Probably the most important magazine in the Black community for decades has been a magazine called Ebony Magazine. Comes out once a month. It still comes out, but it's been sold and it doesn't have the same power it once had. But for years, it had a feature called the 100 Most Influential Black Americans. And every year, absent from that list was Clarence Thomas. This man is a Supreme Court justice, not in Ebony Magazine as one of the most influential Black Americans. Thomas Sowell published over 56 books now. I've lost count. And David Mamet, the playwright in Hollywood, is called Thomas Sowell America's greatest contemporary philosopher. Most Black people don't even know who he is because people like Ebony never mention him in the 100 list of most important Black Americans. Also absent from that list is Walter Williams. Walter Williams, to my knowledge, is the only Black man to head up an economics department of a non-historically Black college. He also had a syndicated column, one of the most widely read English writers, and many Black people don't know who he is because magazines like Ebony don't even mention his name.
Wow, that's so incredible. So you rattle off a lot of names there, and I obviously I've seen the project Uncle Tom and seen all of these different successful people that are just really just knocking the top off it in their life. What was your hope for and the inspiration behind putting this film together?
Well, the inspiration was the director, whose name is Justin Malone, and interestingly, Justin Malone is white. He came to me about 2.5 years ago and told me he had an idea to do a film called Uncle Tom. And I said, what's it about? And he said, well, I was inspired because when Herman Cain ran for president, I saw the way he was interviewed versus the way other Republican candidates were interviewed. And I could tell there was something particularly annoying to people about the fact that he was a Black conservative. I thought that was a very interesting thing to approach. And I said, well, do you have any money to make the film? He goes, no. How much is it going to cost? He said, about $500,000. How much have you raised? He said, zero. I said, let me tell you what, I'll raise the money for you. Let me help you co-write the film and structure the film. Let's get this puppy done. Took us 2.5 years, and it came out. And the driver of the film, Kevin, is the young man who starts at the beginning of the film. His name is Chad Jackson. You never heard of him. He happened to be a contractor in Dallas, minding his own business, a Democrat who's a Christian. And a fellow Christian approached him and said, because he was criticizing the Republican Party, he said, have you read the party platforms, Republican Party, Democratic Party platform? He said, no. He said, I suggest you read them. Your values are far closer to the Republican Party than the Democratic Party. And he read them. And when he read them, he said, wow, I'm a Republican. And it's about the grief he got from friends and family, including his own mother, who thought he had now become part of the problem because he was pointing out the number one problem in the Black community is absent fathers and poor schools and the lack of emphasis on education in the home. And when he started saying that kind of stuff, his mother said, you're just saying things they say. My goodness.
Wow, that's so telling. Wow, that's amazing. So Larry, we just have a few more minutes left, and I'll have just a couple more questions. One would be, do you feel like the history of the Black community is trying to be rewritten?
Absolutely, I do. And it's being written from the perspective of oppression. There's a couple ways you could tell the story. My friend Walter Williams, again, who's in the movie, says, Black people have come further ahead from further behind than any other people in the history of the world. This is a people that after the Civil War, literally only 95% of them could not read or write. And to be fast forward and to be now one of the wealthiest countries in the world, if we were a collective GDP, is absolutely extraordinary. And that's because of the hard work by men and women, some known and some unknown. And in my opinion, Kevin, it is insulting to act as if the conditions that Black people face today rival the conditions that my father faced or his father faced or anybody else. It's ridiculous. Right now in America, work hard, keep your nose clean, and you'll be just fine. There was a poll taken in 1997, Time Magazine and CNN. Black teenagers and white teenagers were asked, is racism a major problem? Not too surprisingly, both of them said yes. But then Black teenagers were asked this question: is racism a major problem, a minor problem, or no problem in your own daily life? 90% of them said minor or no problem in my own daily life. In fact, more Black teenagers than white teenagers said failure to take advantage of available opportunities is a bigger problem than racism. More Black teens said that than white teens. That was 1997, before Obama got elected and reelected, before back-to-back secretaries of state, before back-to-back Black attorneys general. What are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's definitely a story, isn't it?
Definitely a story.
So tell me, tell our viewers how they can actually get a hold of Uncle Tom. How can they watch that today?
Real easy. Just go to uncletom.com. We got the domain right away when we started doing the movie, so we could sell it that way. uncletom.com. And the price has been lowered. So get it while it's hot. uncletom.com. By the way, also be the first in your hood to get you some Uncle Tom merch, Uncle Tom t-shirt, Uncle Tom cap. And when you put it on, send me a selfie. I'll post it.
I definitely will do it. So Larry, this has been such an enlightening conversation. Thank you so much for your time today. I have just one more question for you. And I want you to take your liberty and speak directly to our viewers and tell them, why is it so important for Christians to get involved with their civic duty to vote?
Because if you don't, who will? Our culture is being taken over by Hollywood, by academia, and by media. And they all have an anti-Christ, anti-God, pro-abortion agenda, and we need to do something about that. If we don't stand up, who will? We have a country to save, and it's up to us.
So well said. Larry, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a tremendous blessing. Thank you.
God bless, Kevin.
Visit us at millionvoices.org today for more resources. We will be posting videos just like this with thought leaders all across the nation. Each of these videos connects to one of our 10 guiding truths. Today we talked about family. Please go to millionvoices.org, click on Guiding Truths, and get more content that matters to you. Also, please go to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Share these videos with your friends and your family, and remember, your voice matters.